Have you noticed how often you apologize for things that don't need an apology? You bump into someone and whisper, "Sorry," even when it was them who wasn't looking. You raise your hand in a meeting and start with, "Sorry, this might be a dumb question." You even say, "Sorry," before asking for something simple, like space on a crowded subway, or a moment of someone's time. It sounds small, polite, harmless, but underneath, every "sorry" carries a weight. Because you're not just apologizing for mistakes, you're apologizing for existing, for taking up space, for having needs, opinions, a presence in the room. And here's the brutal truth. You think you're keeping the peace, but you're slowly killing your spirit. Every unnecessary apology chips away at you. Not loud enough to notice at first, but over time, your body learns a script. I'm safest when I shrink. And once that script takes over, you don't even hear yourself doing it anymore. This is why over-apologizing isn't kindness. It's survival. And survival, when stretched over years, starts to look like chains. Chains that don't rattle like metal. Chains that sound like a quiet, automatic, "sorry." And those chains don't come from nowhere. They're built by your own nervous system, wired to keep you safe, even at the cost of your freedom. Psychologists call it the fawn response, a survival instinct that sits alongside fight, flight, and freeze. When danger looms, some people attack, some run, some go still, but others survive by appeasing, by smoothing things over, by making themselves small enough not to be a target. Your brain runs this script faster than thought. The amygdala, your built-in alarm, detects the slightest signal of disapproval, a sigh, a raised eyebrow, the smallest pause, and it pulls a lever. In an instant, stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline surge through your body. Your pulse quickens, your chest tightens, and before you can think, your mouth blurts, "Sorry." It feels polite, but really it's your body saying, "Please don't turn on me. Please let me stay safe." This reflex didn't appear out of nowhere. It's often conditioned early. Children quickly learn that attention, affection, and approval are linked. A smile means belonging. A frown means danger. A raised voice means withdrawal of love. So they adapt. They tiptoe. They appease. They apologize. Approval becomes the currency of security. The problem is that the body doesn't update the script when you grow older. As an adult, the same pattern hijacks your choices. In the office, you preface ideas with "sorry." With friends, you downplay your needs to avoid seeming demanding. At home, you apologize for emotions that don't need apologies. Anger, sadness, even fatigue. Over time, the brain doesn't just practice the behavior, it reinforces it. Neural pathways tied to appeasement grow stronger, while the circuits linked to assertiveness grow weaker. This is how self-silencing becomes second nature. It's not a quirk of personality. It's neuroplasticity at work, sculpting you into someone who believes peace comes only from shrinking. And here's the cruel twist. Your body has confused safety with freedom. At first, saying sorry feels like protection. You smooth things over, you avoid conflict, and for a moment, you feel safe. But when you keep doing it, something shifts. What started as a quick survival trick slowly turns into a habit, and that habit becomes your identity. You stop saying sorry just for mistakes. You start saying sorry for being tired, for asking questions, for needing help, for simply existing as you are. And whether you notice it or not, every sorry carries a hidden message. It tells your nervous system, "I'm a burden. My needs aren't important. I'll only be accepted if I stay small." That isn't kindness. That isn't courtesy. That's you surviving by shrinking. And it comes at the cost of your own self. But the cost of shrinking doesn't stop at your words. It seeps into your body. Every unnecessary sorry comes with a physiological bill, and your nervous system pays it in full. When you live in constant apology, your body is running a stress program on loop. Cortisol, the stress hormone, doesn't just spike during conflict. It drips quietly into your system like a leaky faucet. Over weeks and months, that drip reshapes you. Your muscles stay tight. Your breathing shallow. Your sleep broken. You wake up unrested, not because you didn't sleep enough, but because your body spent the night bracing for conflict that never arrived. Neuroscientists Naomi Eisenberger and Matthew Lieberman discovered something unsettling. The brain processes rejection in the same regions as physical pain, which means your body doesn't distinguish between a slap on the face and a cold silence in a meeting. Both light up the same pain circuits. So when you anticipate judgment, when you preemptively shrink with sorry, your nervous system reacts as if you've been struck. That constant vigilance has a cost. Doctors call it allostatic load, the wear and tear from living in survival mode too long. Elevated cortisol weakens your immune system, slows your metabolism, and erodes memory. It even rewires your brain to expect threat, so that the smallest frown feels like danger. And it goes deeper than the body. Over-apologizing tells your brain a dangerous story. I'm only safe when I disappear. Repeat that story often enough, and your sense of self blurs. Psychologists call it identity diffusion, when you become a collage of everyone's expectations, and the core of you starts to fade. This is why the fatigue of constant apology feels so much heavier than ordinary tiredness. It's not just in your muscles, it's in your identity. It's your body and mind carrying the hidden tax of self-betrayal. Because every sorry you don't mean isn't harmless. It's your nervous system whispering, I don't belong unless I shrink. And when you shrink long enough, something strange happens. The apology stops being just a word. It turns into a mask. Carl Jung called this the persona, the face we show the world so we can fit in, be accepted, avoid rejection. At first, it feels harmless. You smile when you're exhausted. You say, it's fine, when it isn't. You keep your tone soft so no one calls you difficult. The mask buys you a little safety. But here's the danger. Wear the mask too long and you forget it's a mask. It fuses to your skin. You start believing the performance is you. And underneath, all the parts of you you've silenced don't disappear. They become what Jung called the shadow. The emotions, desires, and truths you exile because you think they'll cost you love. The anger you swallow. The grief you disguise. The creativity you hide because it might look foolish. They go underground, but they never stop knocking. Philosopher Soren Kierkegaard warned of this exact despair. The sickness unto death, he called it. Not wanting to be yourself. Not heartbreak. Not failure. But the slow erosion of authenticity. The daily habit of saying sorry for existing until you don't recognize your own reflection. And modern neuroscience backs this up. Studies on emotional suppression show that when you bottle feelings to maintain harmony, your limbic system, the brain's emotional core, keeps firing anyway. The stress doesn't vanish. It leaks out as tension, anxiety, even physical illness. The body records what the mask hides. So you end up in a cruel paradox. The mask earns you applause, but it deepens your invisibility. People admire the role, but they never meet the person. Their love lands on the performance, not on you. And no amount of approval for the mask can fill the loneliness of being unseen underneath. You've probably felt this. In a meeting where you held back your real idea. In a friendship where you laughed at jokes that cut you. In a relationship where every apology felt like one more layer of silence. The tragedy is that the mask you built to protect yourself becomes its own prison. And the longer you hide inside it, the harder it feels to step out. That's why we need to look closer at the cruelest part of this pattern. Because on the surface, apologizing feels like relief. You cut the tension. You avoid the awkward silence. You make sure no one's upset with you. In the moment, it feels like safety. But psychologists warn us that this safety is really just your nervous system chasing short-term comfort. Every apology gives your brain a tiny dopamine hit, a quick signal that says, you avoided rejection. You're still part of the group. It's the same reward loop that drives addictions. The relief is real, but it's fleeting. And here's where the trap tightens. The more your brain learns that apology brings temporary peace, the more it starts demanding it. You don't just say sorry when you've made a mistake. You start offering it preemptively, to soften the air, to pre-clear your right to exist. What began as a social lubricant turns into a survival requirement. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor, saw the danger of this cycle long before dopamine was discovered. He wrote in his journals that the only true fortress is the inner citadel, the part of you that cannot be shaken by gossip, praise, or disapproval. His point was simple. If your peace depends on someone else's reaction, you don't own it. And yet, modern workplaces, friendships, even families often train us in the opposite direction. You apologize for speaking up in a meeting, and the group moves on without tension. In that moment, you feel safer. But later, you replay the scene, not proud that you spoke, but ashamed you had to shrink. The short-term calm leaves a long-term wound. This is the paradox. What feels like safety in the moment actually deepens your danger over time. Because every sorry that isn't necessary quietly convinces your brain that you need to shrink to survive. And when survival becomes the standard, living gets smaller and smaller. The Buddha called this craving, the endless grasping for comfort that becomes its own form of suffering. Neuroscience calls it reinforcement learning, the brain repeating what brings quick relief, even if it costs you in the long run. Different languages, same warning. Relief is not freedom. Which brings us to the breaking point so many people face in midlife, when the habit of apologizing isn't just an annoyance, but a collapse hiding inside the word responsible. And that collapse doesn't arrive all at once. It sneaks in, year by year, apology by apology, until one day you wake up and wonder whose life you've actually been living. This is why midlife hits so hard for so many people. By your 30s, 40s, 50s, the stakes are higher than ever. You're carrying a mortgage. You've got kids who look to you, parents who now depend on you, a partner who expects stability, a career that no longer feels like a ladder, but a ceiling. And in the middle of all that, the quiet habit of apology. You tell yourself you're being responsible, that you're keeping things together. But responsibility often hides apology in disguise. You say yes to projects at work you don't believe in, because saying no feels selfish. You smile at family gatherings while biting your tongue, because speaking truth feels like betrayal. You bury your exhaustion under, "I'm fine," because admitting need feels like weakness. On the surface, it looks like maturity, but it's not. It's managed collapse. Psychologist Erik Erikson mapped this stage of life as a crossroads: generativity versus stagnation. Generativity is when you create, mentor, build, when you leave something meaningful behind. But apology-driven living pulls you toward stagnation. Life doesn't expand, it shrinks. You stop being a creator of your own future and start surviving as a caretaker of everyone else's comfort. And Kierkegaard, writing a century before Erikson, warned of the same danger in a different language. Despair as the sickness unto death, not a dramatic breakdown, but the slow, daily choice to live as someone you're not. And modern psychology agrees. When you spend decades silencing yourself for approval, your nervous system stops distinguishing between who you are and who you perform to be. You don't just wear the mask, you become it. And here's the tragedy. The world may applaud you for it. Your boss calls you dependable. Your family calls you selfless. Your friends call you easygoing. But inside, you know the truth. You've built a life that impresses everyone, except the person living it. That's the hidden cost of decades of sorry. You don't just lose energy. You don't just lose authenticity. You lose the very experience of being alive as yourself. And this is where so many people find themselves in midlife. Successful on the outside, suffocating on the inside. Which raises the next question. If apologizing steals your freedom, what does it do to your relationships? The very places you think you're keeping peace. And here's the painful irony. The very apologies you think are holding your relationships together are often the ones eroding them. When you shrink yourself to keep the peace, the other person doesn't just see your politeness. They start to feel your absence. Over time, over-apologizing teaches the people around you a subtle but dangerous lesson. Your needs matter less. Psychologists studying relational dynamics call this self-silencing, and it corrodes intimacy from the inside out. Because intimacy isn't built on one person smoothing the waters. It's built on honesty, on friction, on two full selves meeting in the middle. When one half of that equation keeps disappearing behind sorry, the relationship tilts. One becomes caretaker, the other becomes comfortable. And comfort without challenge soon turns into distance. Brené Brown makes a sharp distinction here. Vulnerability is not the same as apology. Vulnerability says, "This is who I am. This is what I feel." Apology says, "I'm sorry for being who I am. I'm sorry for feeling." Vulnerability invites connection. Apology invites pity, or worse, quiet dismissal. And the longer you live in that mode, the more resentment brews in the shadow. Carl Jung warned that everything you repress eventually surfaces, often in distorted ways. That anger you swallowed to keep the peace comes out later as bitterness. That truth you silenced leaks out as sarcasm. That exhaustion you covered with, "I'm fine," hardens into distance. You didn't avoid conflict. You just delayed it and made it heavier. You've probably felt this in small ways. A partner who always says, "sorry," until their words start sounding empty. A friend who apologizes before every opinion, until you stop hearing the opinion at all. A colleague who takes blame for things they didn't do, until their competence is quietly questioned. The intention is peace, but the impact is erosion. And this is the cruelest twist. Constant apology doesn't just cost you your sense of self, it costs you the very closeness you were trying to protect. Because true connection doesn't come from you vanishing, it comes from you being fully present. Which leads us to the bigger question. If apology erodes not just self but connection, then what does real freedom in relationships look like? Real freedom in relationships doesn't mean you never bend, never compromise, never apologize when you've genuinely hurt someone. It means the foundation shifts. You stop apologizing for existing, and you start speaking from a place of clarity. The French philosopher Michel de Montaigne said, "The greatest thing in the world is to know how to belong to oneself." Belonging to yourself doesn't make you selfish. It makes you real. And when you show up as real, the people who love you actually have someone to connect to. Psychology backs this up. Studies on authenticity show that people who live in alignment with their inner world, who speak their needs, set boundaries, and stop apologizing for them, report lower stress, stronger resilience, and deeper relationships. Why? Because honesty clears the static. When you no longer perform, the bond isn't with your mask, it's with you. Viktor Frankl, who survived the concentration camps, wrote that between stimulus and response lies our greatest freedom, the freedom to choose. That choice shows up in relationships every day. The raised eyebrow, the critical word, the silence after you speak. These are stimuli. The apology reflex is the conditioned response. But in that space, you can choose differently. You can pause, breathe, respond with truth instead of shrinking with sorry. And here's the paradox. The less you bend for opinions, the more respect you often earn. Because people sense it when you stop groveling. They sense when your yes is real and your no is solid. Respect doesn't grow from endless apology. It grows from clarity, from boundaries, from the quiet confidence of someone who belongs to themselves. The Taoists called this Wu Wei, effortless action, living in flow with your nature, instead of forcing yourself into shapes that please the crowd. It's not rebellion, it's alignment. And when you live that way, relationships stop being negotiations of approval and start becoming places of genuine presence. So, real freedom looks less like keeping the peace and more like being fully alive in the middle of it. It's not about silencing conflict, it's about showing up whole, so even conflict can lead somewhere deeper instead of leaving you invisible. And this is where the shift becomes practical. Because it's one thing to understand the theory, it's another to live it when the pressure hits. So how do you actually stop apologizing for existing? You anchor yourself in 3 simple checks: a breath, a boundary, a belief. A breath, to remind your nervous system you're safe. Slow, deliberate breathing calms the amygdala and tells your body, there is no threat here. A boundary, even a small no, to remind yourself you still have choice. Every time you say no without apology, you teach your brain that safety can come from truth, not from shrinking. A belief, one clear truth about who you are, repeated until it steadies you. Something as simple as, I deserve space. I deserve voice. I deserve to exist without apology. These aren't escapes from the world. They're reminders that you don't need to hand your worth to it. Nietzsche once said, "Become who you are, not who your family expects, not who your boss prefers, not who your fear rehearses." Every unapologetic breath, every honest boundary, every belief you hold firm, they aren't just coping mechanisms. They're steps toward becoming the self you've been shrinking away from. And this is where Lao Tzu's wisdom returns in full force. He warned that caring too much about the crowd's opinions makes you their prisoner. But when you stop bowing to those opinions, you don't become careless, you become clear. And here's the paradox. The less you apologize for existing, the more others respect you. Because strength isn't controlling the crowd, it's no longer needing the crowd. The freedom you once begged for in their approval arrives the moment you stop depending on it. And so the prison of sorry begins to crumble. Not because the voices vanish, but because they no longer hold the key to your peace. The chains fall quiet, and what's left is yours to reclaim. Because at the heart of it, you were never meant to live as an apology. You were meant to live as yourself, steady, present, unapologetically here. So the next time that automatic sorry rises, pause, breathe. Remember, you don't need permission to exist. Now I'd love to hear from you. Where do you catch yourself apologizing the most? At work, with family, or inside your own head? Share it below. Your story might be the reminder someone else needs. And if this resonated with you, stay connected. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and keep walking with us. Because here, you don't need approval to belong.